Welcome back, this is part 2. If you haven't seen part 1 yet, please do go and watch that first. All I'm doing now, because we've got quite a few various building blocks, I'm going to start bringing them all back together, just to start to get a feel for how it's looking. And again, we want to use the top-down view still, to get everything nicely aligned with our reference picture. And as we move into a different view, you can see it all looks quite messy. They're just, it's nothing like we want it to be. So we need to shrink each one down to the height or thickness that we want and move them all into alignment. Generally, I'll move them all to the 0 point on the axis where the empty is. Now, we're going to use the scale tool to make them shorter. You want to make sure you're scaling only on the z-axis, because otherwise it will just shrink the whole thing or shrink it in another direction. Remember, there are the hotkeys, so the hotkey for this would be S for scale, and then you could press Z to just scale in the Z-axis if you are in a different viewpoint, but you can use the little handles as well. To add some variation, I'm going to make the leaves a bit shorter than the petals, so they're a bit lower down. And we do want the bottoms to all be relatively aligned. They don't have to be perfect down to the thousandth of an inch. The printer will cope with a bit of difference, but it's best to just get them as close as you can. And the spiked sections we want to be slightly higher, again to give them a bit of definition, just so that they're actually there. And for the central crest we're using yet another cylinder, because this one actually is circle, so we're going to make a little plain cylinder just to give us a base to put the other bits on. And I'm only really adding this bit just to make sure that we hide any lower points or any bits where there are holes, just to create a definite flat platform. Now, looking at the remaining details, for these little circles we'll go add UV sphere, which will create this nice big sphere which we can resize down. If you click in the circle in the resize circle, it'll resize it on every axis, so keep it as a sphere. And then make it so it's half stuck into the mesh. You'll get that nice dome shape sticking out. And move it and copy it. So for the star shape, I'm going to go add mesh cone to make a cone, but we'll want it to be on its side. So I'm going to go into a side-on viewpoint, go S for scale, and no, wait, we're going to go R for rotate, and then rotate it just in this angle. It can be hard to get things perfectly accurate, but if you go number pad, type in 90, that'll rotate it round a right angle. Now we're going to go into modifying that cylinder. The star doesn't go straight out, the spikes kind of bow out a little bit, so if we go into face select and select the very end of it, then we can use E, the extrude tool, pull it out a little bit and create another section. We can extrude again, make another little section, and all of this gives us more points to play with. Going side on, select the whole lot and scale it down to make them a bit narrower, and we can give it the kind of profile that we want and move them along as well, and just generally play with it till I'm happy with the shape. There we go, we've got a bit more of a fluted shape now. Now I'm going to select the entire thing, go side on again, and scale the whole thing just down on the z-axis to flatten it out. As you can see, it's given it an oval base. And then that can be moved into place to be one of the points of our star, scaled down, and then just move it until I'm happy with the placement. Then, of course, we're going to duplicate it and add 5 more. We can still edit it from here. So we've got pretty much the whole shape done, and surprise surprise, for the last bit to fill in, this hexagon in the middle, we're going to use yet another cylinder, because if we make a cylinder but set it to only have 6 sides, then it is a hexagonal prism. Now I'm just going to make that and shrink it down to be roughly the right size. As you can see here, it doesn't join perfectly into the spikes. There's this kind of gap where they meet the flat edge. I might try and neaten that up later, but ultimately the detailing is going to be so small that it won't really make any difference to the final print. And the very final smallest star, I'm going to use a 12-sided cylinder this time, so that there's a point for each of the 6 peaks, and then a point for each of the 6 inner points. Now it's just time to get everything definitely aligned, get it the height I want it to be. I think I possibly had it a bit tall at first. It doesn't need to be that tall since PLA and 3D printed plastics are generally quite sturdy. So just get everything how you want it and then it'll be ready to export for print. This could absolutely be printed as is, however I am going to do a little bit here just of trying to give it some rounder edges, add a bit more detail to it. So working in solid viewport shading, we can now select just the bits that we want, in this case just the top edge, being careful of course if you're using the drag select to select just the bits you want, and shift select lets you select more than one part at a time by clicking. Then you can either use the bevel tool to give it a bit of a bevel on the side, or as with this second one, you can use the loop cut tool to make an additional segment within the shape and then use that as more points to play around with to give it shape. So I'm just going to make these bits a bit rounded at the edges. So with just one last good look at every side of the model to see how I like it, check I'm happy with it, then it's ready to export. For exporting, .stl file is the usual for 3D printing. If you want to import it into a different program, you might want to use a .obj wavefront, but I'm going to export it as an STL, just give it a memorable name and leave it somewhere so I can find it. Now, one thing I haven't done in this is dealt with the size. That's because I like to actually put it into another program first anyway. For this I use Tinkercad. I really like Tinkercad because it means you can have a constant online library of all your models. And again, it's free to use. So I've gone into my Tinkercad account, made a new workspace, and I'm going to import the model. Here you can resize it. This is in millimeters, so I want it to be about 2 inches or about 70 millimeters. You just have to input one dimension and then it scales. Now that it's imported, one other really useful function of Tinkercad is that you can see a bit better if there are any abnormalities popping up. I did once have a model where there was a little divot that I hadn't noticed before. As you can see here, the spheres look a bit lumpy, but I think that will be okay. So I'm going to export that, ready for print. I don't have my own 3D printer, I have to send things off to be printed, but nonetheless I like to load my models into this program called Ultimaker Cura, which lets you select various 3D printers. This is the one for my library's 3D printer, and if you import the model you can see it on the print bed. You can also then go down here and go to Slice, which will show you both the time and filament, which lets you gauge a rough cost if they price by that, and it lets you see if there are any problem areas for printing. So I've just gone back to my model quickly. I was thinking I'd just glue it onto the costume, but I thought that's actually unnecessary. I'm going to make a couple of jump rings onto it. To do this, we're just going to add a torus, scale it down, and put it halfway into the model, which will make a nice integrated loop ready for sewing on or attaching to a chain. And here is the printed emblem. I'm really pleased with how this came out. It's got really nice detail, the raised sections and the different heights really work well, and the jump rings are really sturdy. So yeah, I'm really excited to add this onto a costume. I hope this tutorial has helped anyone. Like I say, it might not be the best way to do it, but you know, I'm looking forward to seeing what you all come up with. Maybe drop me a link if you make anything, and if you've got any advice or you think I'm doing it wrong, please do leave a comment below. Please check out my Patreon and Facebook as well, links will be in the description, and let me know what tutorials you'd like to see next.